Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's just start. Okay, what we're going to be doing is not this, basically. It's just like this database that we have, and we started doing some kind of using procedures in order for, instead of using the queries like these ones and then copying and pasting them. For example, for this query, instead of being here for the after insert, I do the same in the after delete, but this time with the plus instead of the minus, with the old instead of the new. I'm going to use this kind of way, which is more convenient. Now I don't have to do this, I can just delete it, and then I can delete this one too, because this is what is going to happen. Now the other thing is that actually I did not do one thing, is that the update also I need to update that, because in the update what I need to do, I need to delete what was before and insert the new ones. Basically what I need to do is just, instead of delete, now I'm going to do this add and then this new instead of old. Now you remember that this is actually here, this update stock, which this update stock, if I just maximize it a little bit so I can see it better. Now what it does, it just takes like 3 parameters, an operation, which is the text. It can be anything else. I just tried with the text. I've just showed you with text. You can use a boolean, you can use an int, you can use whatever, but this is something to distinguish between an add and a delete. So either way, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, so all these ways are correct. Now all I need to do is to have like these two type of data type, these two type of parameters, one for the quantity and the other one for the item. And this quantity are like variables that I use here, and we put this if just to be able to distinguish between if it's a delete or not. Because if it's a delete, I would like this to be putting back the quantity that was taken before, to put it back in stock. So that's why this minus minus is going to become a plus. So now what I'd like to do is to do the same thing again for the rest. So this is now this is the update. I'm going to remove this because I have everything now in my in the insert and in the delete, so I'm just going to take it from there. But now what I would like to do is to, like, I have to do the delete and then I update, and this, both of them, this is now updating the stock. I delete the old one and add the new one, and now I'm going to do the same thing again with the total of the invoice. Now this total of invoice, now how many parameters do I need? I need the quantity sold, I need the price, and I need the ID invoice. Actually I can use 3 plus 1 to distinguish if it's an add or delete, or I can use 2 by using this to be already calculated, and then I just use the total and add it here. So I'm just going to show you the 2 ways. Let me just create now a new one. I'm going to name it update invoice. And then if I update the invoice, what is going to happen is I need to copy these things here. Now by copying them, now I would like to specify, okay, what is going to be needed. So these should be, either each one of them is going to be like a different parameter, or I'd like to put the both. Well, I think each one of you know how to put each one of them as a parameter. I just would like to show you how can I do both of them as, like, only use 2 arguments on top of the operation. So I can use like for continuity, I'm just going to use the same thing. I'm going to name it operation, so to be standard in the way that I'm designing my procedures. This is something in programming you should always do, just be consistent. If you use, for example, in the first one here, I'm using I'm using this kind of operation as varchar 10, etc. So I should be consistent and do the same in this one. So let me just then copy this one and paste, and let me increase this. There's a syntax error, that's why I have something like here, but hopefully it's going to be fixed. And I have another one which is the I'm going to say the total of the invoice. I'm going to name it total invoice, so it will be different from these fields, from these columns from the table invoice, and which is a double. and then I have another one, which is the ID of the invoice, and I'm going to call it invoice. It's going to be confusing with invoice. I cannot use this name because it's the name of the table, so I'm going to call it inv, yeah, as int. Yeah. No, it's not okay. It's going to be a problem. That's why I'm trying to choose something that is not going to be the same name. If I use this, for example, now what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up doing this. Now this is going to be confusing for the computer. Now, is this the table or is this like the parameter? And whenever there's confusion, there's a mistake, there's an error. So what you could do if you'd like to do something like this, you just make a small change. For example, you can do something like this, or like p underscore like parameter invoice. Now this is clear that this is not a table, so you just make sure that it's easily there's a distinction between the different tables, columns, and the parameters. So now, for example, I can say, like, to be consistent, I'm going to say p for parameter and then the parameter total. And now this total means I'm going to do this. So this is going to happen when I'm adding. Here comes Sam. What about when I'm deleting? What I'm going to do basically something similar to this, but I just would like to specify this instead. I'm just going to copy this thing and then paste it here. And every time I have to zoom in. So if the operation is delete, well, basically it's not quantity now, it's this one. The total is going to be negative. So I'll make the total negative, this parameter total to be negative, so it will be minus. If it's not, it will be plus. So now if I'm going to call this, welcome Sam. If I'm going to call this here, I'm going to call something like this. No, let's just, before doing that, so it's update invoice, that's the name, and then this is add. I'm not going to add this new quantity sold. I'm going to do this. I don't need the parameters, the parentheses, but I can definitively keep them. But this is what I need. Now this is going to take these values, multiply them, and then put them as an argument for this second parameter. And this one should be the ID of the invoice. And then I can just delete this. So now what I'm doing, I'm just calculating the total. I send it inside this procedure. So the procedure, it will just check if it's a delete or an add. And then if it's whatever, if it's an add, it's not going to touch anything. It's just going to add this total. It's going to will add it to the total. If it was a delete, that means I had to subtract the total. So this will make the total become negative. So plus with the minus becomes make it negative. Is that okay up to now? So all I need to do now is just, after updating the invoice, I need to do the same, and in the after delete, sorry. So after delete, I don't need this, but of course instead of new it should be. So this is what I basically need to put here. This is the calculation of the total, and this old ID of the invoice, and I can remove this thing. And yes, this should be delete instead of add. Thank you. And if I'd like to do this here, the update, well, then I'm going to just copy this, put an add, maybe the delete would first, and add just to be also consistent, and everything that was old becomes new, and everything will work out. So this is updating the stock, this is updating the invoice. Now the only one remaining is the customer. So I'm going to create a third one, which is update the customer, and with that same thing I'm going to have in operation, then varchar 10. Even though I don't need 10, I can just calculate how many characters the delete has. I can put the exact same, this one, but this is a temporary variable. This is not like it doesn't have a big impact like if it was like a column in the table, because column in the table means all the data is going to be having the same size, or that's that kind of size. But as an argument, it's just going to be that size for a short period of time while the processing is happening, and when the trigger is over, everything goes out from the memory. So we don't going to be using a lot of memory. Even if we use like 100 here, it's not going to be a big deal. But it would be better if you'd like to really, if you're working on optimization, you can just put this as delete has how many, 6 letters, so you can use as a maximum value as 6 to be able to hold this delete. Yeah. But anyways, so now for the customer, let me just go back here and see what do I need. Now for the customer, what I need to do, this is after insert, I need first to get the ID of the customer, put it somewhere, and then I update this total with this quantity sold and price, which basically what I need again is this, the total that I need to add, and this, well, but this, if you give me the invoice, I can get it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going just to copy basically what I did here. Let me just remove here, so it will not be this update invoice. This is, I'm going to open this one. Let me just copy this part here, and actually, you know what, copy everything, and go back to customer, and then paste everything, zoom in. Now what I have is that I need to have the total and the ID of the invoice. Why? Because that's what I need. The total is this, and the ID of the invoice. That's what these are the values that I need in this work of trying to update the total of the customer. I can use again one for each, but since I can make the multiplication and send the value, that's it. It's not going to be a big deal. Now the only thing that I would like to change is this thing, so I'm going to copy this processing, and then I'm going to put it here. So I'm not going to just do one thing. So if it's delete, I'm going to do something different. So let me show you what is going to happen. First of all, these are the parameters. I just need the total and the invoice. And then when I have the invoice, well, I'm going to use this parameter of the invoice, which is the ID of the invoice here, to get the variable into the variable. Of course, I need to declare that variable, so I'm going to declare it. Declare. Well, I'm not going to name it variable. I'm just going to name it something like ID customer as int. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this into ID customer. So I get the ID customer here into this variable, and then from the invoice where the ID is the ID that I just sent as a parameter, and then I'm going to update the customer with this ID that I just stored in this variable, with this to be, what should I put here? I love the silence. Total? Right? P total, because this is going to be just adding total to itself, but this P means this is the parameter total that I'd like to add to here. If it's delete, this is going to be minus, because I'd like to take out the total. Yes? Well, the total of a customer is, we can have 5 customers, each customer have many invoices, and this total of the customer is going to give us the total of all the invoices of that customer. Now the total of the invoice is that if your invoice has many items, or one or many, and this only gives us the total of this invoice only. So now I'm having, every time I update the customer, you need to give me, okay, what am I doing? Is it an add or a delete? If it's a delete, I will make the total to be negative, so I'm going to subtract the total. If it's an add, I'm going to leave it as it is. It's a positive total. All I need as well is the ID of the invoice. From the ID of the invoice, I get the ID of the customer, because every invoice has only one customer. So that's why I'm getting that and store it here. Once I have this ID, I just get that total, and I update the total of the customer with the ID of the customer is the one that I just extracted from that query. This being said, all I need to do now is go back to the tables here, and then do the same call here, because it's going to be like this call basically, and I don't need this declare.
You have to change customer.
And of course, yes, I have to change this to be this is going to stay the same. No, you know what, nothing is going to change, because I just need to change this to be customer. That's it. Did you realize that? because this is the total, which is quantity sold multiplied by price. Let me show you how it was before. So just quantity sold multiplied by price. Of course, this is old, but this is basically the same thing as this. And then the old invoice, the old invoice. So basically, it's just copy and paste, and we can remove these and these and make it customer. So you can see they have things in common. I can just merge them actually much easily. But let's just do something like this. Okay? So now, what I can do is that, okay, I just update, this is the delete. This is the insert. And let me just push these for consistency as well. And now for the, I'm just going for the update, I'm just going to copy this and paste it and change this to be customer. Now it's going to be inshallah working. Do I need this? There's a trigger here actually, but this is going to update the customer, so I don't need here anything. So there's some trigger here, but it's all commented out. I left it just to show you that we can do both. If we don't update from the customer from the table, that is invoice as item, I can update it from here as well, but just I left it here. So even though it shows it's a trigger, basically it's not. I'm just leaving it for you as a documentation. But the only triggers that are working are these ones. So every time after insert or after update or after delete, what is going to happen is just going to call all these the same procedure with either add or delete. Even the update is just we delete and then we add at the same time. Not at the same time, one after the other. Now I'd like to see that at work. I will just connect. No, that's not what I want. Cancel. Here, let's connect. I would like to run and then insert things and then delete them. Okay, basically I just would like to, let me increase this. I would like to insert first and then delete. So I would like to make sure that everything works fine. So let's just insert and then see the result. So I'm using company 2, but of course I forgot to do the forward engineering first. Let me do the forward engineering. Oops. I need to go back here, do the forward engineer, Control G. Basically, this is what I'm pressing, this Control G here, forward engineering, and then next, next, and you see this export MySQL triggers. I don't need this one, so I don't need it. I just need these ones. So I'm going to select these ones. No, I meant these ones. So this update is not going to be part of it. So which means this is not going to be generating the code for this after update of the customer. Now only what I have, these are the procedures, and then these are the triggers. So I have trigger after update. Well, it's there. Well, maybe I did something wrong. You know what? Back. When I did something like this, that means only this one is going to be selected. One is selected, and that's actually the opposite that I need. I meant this one not be selected. 3 is selected, and this one not selected. So now if I go back, I'm going to see the 3 procedure, and then this is the trigger after insert on invoice as item, and this procedure, and then this is after update, after delete. Next, and then we'll try. Yes? The invoice has item. It does not have a direct relationship with the customer.
That's why I want to know how we can update.
Well, what we need is basically we need the ID of the customer, right? So what we used to do before, we did what? We did this query select to extract the ID of the customer based on the invoice and put it somewhere in a variable. Then this variable will contain the ID of the customer where this ID invoice has item has been updated. Because I don't have this information in that table, so I need to extract it. But I have the ID of the invoice, and if you give me the ID of the invoice, I give you the ID of the customer. I can have that. That's what I do from this part of it, this step. That's why I cannot just do this immediately, because I don't know which customer to update. But if you give me the ID of the invoice, and then I fetch what's the ID of the customer associated to this invoice, and I store it somewhere, then I can update the customer with this parameter of the total, and add this ID customer, etc. So that's why this step requires to have a select before. So everything went fine, alhamdulillah. Now I'm going to try to run it again, and this time to see what is going to happen before and after. I always, as you can see, it's very hard to debug triggers and procedures, because you're going to, when you run something, it's going to give you an error, then you have to trace back, try to understand, okay, what happened, there's a trigger, which trigger was raised. That's why you need to do something like this. You select, you display everything before and after, so you can see what's going on. Now if I run this thing now, everything should run without a problem, alhamdulillah. And then let's go back. The first batch, this is before customer. We had these two customers with total 0. We have only one invoice with the ID of customer is 1, and then invoice as item is empty, and then the items, 2 items at 100 as quantity. Now after inserting one item number 2, so this is the ID of the invoice is 1, the ID of the item is 2, and then we took 20 in quantity sold with the price of 10, which means I'm expecting this 100 here to become 80, and then I'm expecting as well that this invoice to become 200, because it's 20 times 10, and I'm expecting the customer number 1 to become 200, because it's going to update that to add this 200 to the customer, the total of the customer. So let's just see what happened. Let's see here the customer. Now it's after the query it became 200, which means this query has worked perfectly. Now the total of the invoice has changed. This was added, and then the item, the quantity stock 2 went by 20. Now to make sure that our procedures for the delete works as well, if I delete this, it should show me the previous state that it was in. So I'm going to again select all of these. Now I'm going to delete which one? Well, this one with the ID invoice is 1. I'm going to delete this one with ID invoice is 1 and product ID item is 2. So now if I run, this is how it was before. It was 200. Now after, it's 0. The invoice was 200. After, it's 0. Invoice has item, it had 1 line, now it has 0. And then the last one, the item was 80. I need to put back the 20, so it backs to 100. So both procedures with the delete and add works fine. Okay? There's a warning because I don't know. What does this mean? About the UTF is currently an alias for the character set blah blah blah, which will be replaced by, this is like some kind of warning that's going to happen in future release, and we don't care about that for now. But this is something that is weird. I need to, but this is still a warning because if something is going to be happening in the future, so I don't care about it. Is that okay? Now the last thing that I would like to show you is how to have just one procedure and do everything in one, which will make a little bit more sense, because we need to do these 3 things at once. These are not separated anyways. They all have to happen together. You can keep them separated, it's not a problem, but it's also possible to group them all, and that's what I'd like to show you. I'm going to leave these ones, and I'm going to do something like add a routine that I'm going to call do updates. Do all updates. I mean all updates maybe. So for the all updates, I will need to do the same thing. Either it's delete or insert. So what's the data that I need? I need basically this operation. It's going to be this varchar 10, let's say. And then I need to have as an input, okay, I need to have all the different inputs from all the others. So this one, it just gets what? It gets the quantity and then the ID of the item. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do something, I'm going to be more specific. So this all updates here. So I'm going to name this to be p quantity so this is the parameter of the quantity, so I'm going to be consistent. Parameter of the item PIT, and then I need also what is available here for the invoice. I need the total, but if I have the quantity, I just need the price basically to have the total. Why should I have the total again, which is going to be like some kind of confusion? Just give me the price and I'm going to be able to do everything. So I'm going to switch back to the calculations later on, but let's do that. Now I need the ID of the invoice as well. That's all I need basically from this. So all updates, it will need the ID of the item, the ID of the invoice, and let me just let me just put this like that, the quantity, and then the price. I'm going to name it like this, p price, which is an int. No, the price is double. And then we have this ID of the item and then ID of the invoice. Let me call them ID like this. And this is quantity sold. So I'm going to make this really clear. Why? Because we're going to be doing a lot of different things together, so I want things to be as clear as possible. So now what needs to happen is, let's have a look at update stock. What was I doing when I'm updating the stock? Let's go back here. I was doing something like this, which is fine, but basically what I'm going to do is that if this is going to be replaced by quantity sold, right? So if the operation is delete, I do the quantity sold to be negative. Now once I do that, I don't need to change anything else. That's what's funny about it, because what is going to happen if I go back to, okay, if I need to update the invoice, what should I do? I should do this again. Okay, let's go back here, all updates. So this is about the quantity stock. I forgot, I need to have this p item. Item ID. And I just realized one thing, is that we put item, it was item here. See? There is confusion, and it worked. It did work, right? Even though this item here is the same as the table name. So it found out that, well, I just learned that MySQL is distinguishing between the parameter and the table, which is nice. But I'm not happy about it because it can be confusing for us working with it. So basically I'm just going to do it myself here, and I'm going to just change that to this anyways. Now for the invoice, you see I need the total, but I don't have the total now. I have the quantity sold multiplied by the price. So what if now, if it's a delete, this becomes negative, which means it works. So this quantity stock now, if it's going to be delete, this is going to be negative, which means I'm going to add to the stock, which is what I'd like to do. I'm going to subtract the total, which is what I'd like to do. Now the last thing is to do the thing that I'm doing with the, let me just copy everything, then delete the rest. This is about the customers. So for the customer, I just need to declare first, so declaration should be at the top. I'm going to declare the ID of the customer. Oops. So I declare the ID of the customer, then I do the whole thing. I don't need this. And then once I find the ID of the customer, based on the ID of the invoice that I have as a parameter, which is called now invoice ID actually. So just to make sure that I'm using the same names. So this is invoice ID. Then this ID of the customer is going to be this variable. It's going to be here, but I don't have the total, but I have this. I can put it here. Or you know what? I can just declare another variable, just for fun. How am I going to call it? I don't want to use. I'm going to use total with capital T. It might be confusing. I don't know. Let's put underscore total. How about this? Well, it's going to be confusing. Let's call it variable total. I don't know, I'm just out of ideas about what kind of names. Sorry? Cost? Okay, let's call it cost. I like it. So I'm going to call this is the cost, and then, or maybe subtotal, whatever, it doesn't matter. Now, as soon as I do this, after the if, I'm going to get the cost to be equal to this thing. Of course, this cannot work like this. Every time I would like to put a value into a variable, I need to use exactly set. So now it takes this and put it as the cost, and I don't need to do this anymore, because the cost is, if it's negative, I'm going to calculate this once, so I don't have to calculate it twice. And now this thing is going to work all the time. Just in the after insert, I'm going just to say one thing, and one call one procedure is going to do everything. So let's save this. No, not here. Cancel. Let's just go back now into here. So the invoice, I'm going to leave this as a comment again, just so you can see them. But here I'm going to call maybe this one. I'm going to call this all update all. I don't know what I called it, all updates. All updates. All updates with S. Let's check. It's all updates with S, yes. And then I come set up. And then not here, but here. I just need to make its add. We have the what I need to make sure that I'm putting the things in the right order, because I need the quantity sold, then the price, then the item ID, and the invoice ID. But you know what? Because in my table they are in this order, I'm just going to put this. It will be maybe more intuitive. It doesn't matter, but I just put it something that it's the same order that we have in the table, so I don't need to think about them. I'm going to put everything as they are in the table. So I have this new, I have everything here. New ID invoice, then new item, ID item, then new quantity sold. All I need to do is this new price now. And just copy this whole thing, paste it here. Let's put this as a comment again. Let's paste it here, this time with delete, and everything that is new is going to be old, 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 and old. I can just put this in 2 lines so I can see everything. Okay, let me copy this and paste it here. And then I need to copy these 2 things. So this is, I delete and then I add a new, 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 and new. Now the moment of truth. Let's see if this is going to work. So I have this delete, I have this update, which is delete and then add, and I have this add. Let's forward engineer. I don't care if it's add the other trigger. It's not going to do anything anyways. Now, okay, done. Let's just try again with the same thing. Of course, I need to start insert first, then delete. So let me select these and then run. So before 0, everything this is 0, and then empty, and then 100. After this is 200, still this is the 200, okay. The 20 was added, and then this 20 was subtracted from here. And if I delete now, and run again, so before, what happened here? It wasn't like this before. something weird here. And now it's empty, but it wasn't like this. Something happened here. But this was before, but after it's 0, and this is 0, and then there's nothing here, and then there's something like 100. Now if I insert it again, I would like to try the update where both of them are going to be working. Actually, the update is going to be delete and insert, so it's going to be, working. But by testing the insert and delete, I have tested also the update, because the update is also having the delete and then update. So if it worked, it worked. But I'd like to show you that it works by doing another thing. Let me just insert this. Now by just inserting this thing, I'm just having like this 20 things like that. I'd like to show you a very complicated update, which basically I would like to, this, instead of being like 20 from 1, I would like it to be from 2. And let's just try to do something. And now I realize there's another thing that we need to update it actually. Let me show it to you first. So let me just do this. Now if I update this invoice as item and set ID item to be equal to 1. Now I only have one line, one row, so I don't need to put a condition because there's only one row. So instead of being 1 from the item, I sold 20 from item number 2, I'd like to be 20 from item number 1. What is going to be the result, or maybe I'm going to be I set item on 1, and I'm going to set also, no, it's not and, there's no and. It's comma, and then I'm going to change the quantity sold to be 10. So I'm doing two things at once. So I'm changing this to 1 and then this to 10, which means now what should happen? I should put back 20 here and take only 10 from here. So the total, also the invoice is going to change from 200 to 100, and also this should be changed to 100. Now if I run this thing and see what happened, and I can see that the quantity has been correctly updated, because this is the new value of the invoice as item, and then this is the total of the invoice. And what is happening here? This is the total of the customer. So everything went fine with the updates, even if I do this kind of complicated update. But one update is going to be an issue. I'm going to show you the issue. What if now, if I update not the invoice size item, but just the invoice, and set the customer ID? Is it the customer ID? Table invoice is ID customer, and set the ID customer to be equal to 2 instead of 1. Now what should happen is that everything should stay the same, but this should become 2, and then this 100 should be for Abdullah, not for Muhammad. Now I don't have anything to do that, because now my trigger here, wait, not here, sorry, the invoice, after update, nothing happens. But I should do something actually. So when I update this, I should do this kind of updates basically. Let me just, I should update the customer, remove the total, the old total from the customer number 1, and put the new total in the customer number 2. The new and old are the same in this case. The old is 100, the new is still 100. But the old customer and the new customer are different. So this is really necessary to keep it. But if I keep it, what is going to happen is that if I insert, this is going to be updated. I have two updates. So we need to have an if statement somewhere. Well, this is possible, but also the easiest way is to remove the updates of the customer from here and leave them only to be updated here. I mean, from this one, all updates. This all updates. I don't want to use this one, so I just need to remove this one, and everything about the ID of the customer is going to be removed as well, because this should be done separately every time I'm updating, and every time I'm updating the invoice, this query here is going to be triggering the trigger inside the invoice. This one, because it's going to be an update, so it's going to be triggering this update. So I can just call this, have this update customer, and this is an add. And what else do I need to give? And this here, let me just, I was too quick, let me just not delete. And yeah, this I'm called, so update customer. You know what, I'd like to copy this from somewhere. I can just have it here, because I have this into one of the triggers, and then after update I can just update it from here. This is the update customer, just go update this one, and then go back here, this one. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, you see that what I need here, I need the total and the ID of the customer. That's all I need. So if I do this, I'm going to, I don't need this here. This is going to be the old total, and I have the ID of the customer, and this is going to be new ID of the customer and new total. Now, because this, in this table invoice, I have total and I have the ID customer. That's why I could just use this. And this way, this other query here, this one is going to work. So I'm not going to try it now because I know it's not going to work. Even let's try it. So I updated this customer to be customer number 2. The invoice number 2 is about customer number 2, but still, if I run this thing, I'm going to see that the customer number 1 has the total of 100, even though the invoice is about the customer number 2. But if I do these changes that I just did, now I just made sure that in this all updates, the part about the customer is not there, but I'm going to use this update customer. Now if I run this Control G forward engineer and run the rest, is going to be working, inshallah. Okay, close, and then let's run it again. Okay, I need to insert, so I'm just going to have the insert. Now it's going to be 200 because of this item number 2, but it doesn't matter. So let me just insert these and then run and select, so I can see before and after. So before, and before, and then after, there's 200, and then item is 2. Now I'd like to change this, update this, it becomes 2. So I'm going to update this thing. So now the invoice, I'm going to set the customer to be 2. I'm not putting anywhere close, because I only have one line. I don't need to put a where, but normally I should put a where and ID is equal to something, where ID invoice is equal to 1, for example, if I do something like this, because I'd like to change this on, not for all invoices, only for one specific one, because I have only one already, so I don't need to put this where. But now that I typed it, I'm going to leave it. So let me run again. Oh, I don't need to insert again. So let me run again with before and after, and let's run. So before it was like this, after it's like this. Huh? What just happened? What just happened?
Isn't the update
No, because I saw you getting a little bit sleepy with my talk, so I didn't pay too much attention to one change that I made, and you just keep accepting whatever I'm sending to you. But there was one of the big things that happens is that if you go back here, let's if I see if I have Control Z, I do. Look at what was the query here. Is this query what I'm calling now with update customer? Let's have a look at update customer. What is the query of update customer? If I go back here and see update customer, this is what is going to happen, update customer. Now it takes the same amount of parameters, but this assumes that this is an invoice. So when I sent it, like this is what happened. This is how it was, right? It was like this. Now when I sent it this thing, I sent it the ID of the customer, but in the third parameter. In the third parameter was expected the ID of the invoice. So that number here was used in some kind of weird thing, but that's not what I want. Now my ID customer, my update customer is not this one. I need to do another one, which is if I'd like to use this kind of thing, I need to use that one with this type of queries inside of it. This is what I need to do. So basically, if I don't do this, I just leave it the way it was before without any, it's going to work. But if I want this to be some kind of procedure, then I need not to use this one that I just used before. So that's why you need to pay attention a little bit. I'm just trying to spice up your programming. Anyways, now let's try. I'm going to be fast forwarding because I want you to practice these. And for the next exercise, okay? So let's go back here. I'm going to insert, what is this? Yeah, I'm going to insert, and I'm going to update, and then I'm going to see the result, because I'm expecting the result to be, I don't need to have the inserts now. I'm just going to run. You know what is going to be expected, so it should be 200 in the Abdullah, so that's what I'm trying to see, and this is what I'm going to see now, because now it was changed to 2. You see, this is what I run. I inserted in invoice number 1 that was for Muhammad, and then I changed the ID customer 2 for this invoice number 1. So now by changing that, it also changed the total to the new customer. So a lot of fun, as you can see, and you have to be careful when you do your programming. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to share this file with you. You're going to find it on Blackboard, inshallah, so you can go back to it. But I would like you to now focus on doing one thing, this exercise number 2 here. So some of you started actually yesterday. I would like you to continue on that, which is just update this student average and also this report grade based on if it's negative or not in the max.